we having a countdown?
Yep, we're good to go. Good morning.
Morning.
Anna.
Morning, everybody. Welcome to the second day of Tolpuddle 2020, hashtag Tolpuddle 2020. We're here with you all day. Again, I'm in my living room in Bristol. There's Joe and Nigel who are right there in Dorchester. We've got people at TUC Southwest HQ and basically all over the Southwest here to entertain, educate and amuse you and give you company for the weekend when we can't be together in person. It's great to have you back. There's a really packed day. We're starting off fairly softly with some music, some talks, just little intros from different people in unions. So please do bear with us. We've got some really great talks coming up. May I just say, remember, some of them you have to sign up to on Zoom. They're not going to be streamed. The Shami Chakrabarti one at 12 o'clock is Zoom only. So please do sign up to that and make sure that you're sharing the content with everybody. Make sure all your friends and family can enjoy it. For this weekend, we're all friends and family. That's what the union movement's about, sticking together. And this is a weekend of solidarity from us to you. I don't know if there's anyone actually there to move over to the first thing, which is we've got lots of little things from people. So we're going to be seeing from Nick Ireland's garden, where he's literally set up a Tolpuddle. I'm very jealous. I don't have a garden, so my setup is my desk and some lovely flowers.
I hope we're good to go with the General Secretary of the National Education Union sending us a message.
Hi, my name's Kevin Courtney and I'm the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, and on behalf of the NEU, sending greetings to everyone taking part in this virtual Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival this year, hoping for better for a real life festival next year. The festival isn't just about the history of the trades union movement, it's a celebration of the present, it's a mobilisation and an inspiration for the future. And this pandemic has shown trades unions at their best. Trades union members have helped our society through the worst of this crisis, and we have kept the vulnerable safe. It's vital that we carry on doing that. Solidarity with everyone at the festival. Let's celebrate what we can do best. What trades unionism brings to the people of this country. Solidarity forever.
Jack Jones was an irrepressible force of nature. A man whose heart was filled with compassion, who had a spirit made of steel and a brain as sharp as a razor. A man who exercised more power over government economic policy than any other trade union leader in this country's history.
Many ordinary people did genuinely believe he was the best Prime Minister we never had.
At any time when it was the state versus ordinary working people, he'd be in the middle of it.
Jack Jones was one of the biggest influences on me as a trade unionist and as a socialist.
He was a giant of our movement, and many of us have got huge boots to fill.
He's someone who fought for workers' rights, for democracy, not just in politics but in the workplace as well. And the world would be a better place if we had more Jack Joneses.
Anybody who looks at Jack's life and says, well, it was then, nothing to do with now, absolutely wrong. Know about him and his times, and you'll be able to fight the fight again.
The quiet Dorset village of Tolpuddle is the surprising location of one of the most significant episodes in the birth of trade unionism and the development of human rights around the world. The story of the 6 farm workers transported for forming a trade union and the campaign to free them has been remembered and celebrated ever since their return in 1838. The first memorial in Tolpuddle was unveiled in 1912 by the then Labour leader Arthur Henderson. This was the first recorded Tolpuddle Martyrs procession and rally. It was in 1934, the centenary of their trial, when the TUC built the cottages and organised a week-long of festivities and celebrations.
brave men, we've read your story. The trial, the grief, the pain and the glory at the hands of the squire, the Whig and the Tory in London's land. But if I can ask you one last question, one last thought, in your reflection, did you lose all hope? Did you pray for protection on the road in Dorchester? On the road, on the road, by the masters of oppression, you were taken from your land. On the road, on the road, the immortal power of freedom took you by the hand. Did you wake with a dread in the dark day dawning? Did the sun force away through the clouds of the morning? Was the lark on the wing above you soaring, feeling in the sky? What thoughts did you share? What fears were growing? Did you think you'd be home for the conquerors throwing? Did you think of the land where you'd be going? On the road to Dorchester, on the road, on the road, by the masters of oppression, you were taken from your land. On the road, on the road, the immortal power of freedom took you by the hand. When you cross Gray's Bridge with the jail ahead, past the spire of the church, the graves of the dead, did you feel regret for the things you said, the oath that you had sworn? Were you sure in your heart that your cause was right? Were you firmly resolved to stand and fight for the right to resist the master's might, for children yet unborn? On the road, on the road, by the masters of oppression, you were taken from your land. On the road, on the road, for the immortal power of freedom took you by the hand. The immortal power of freedom took you by the hand.
Welcome to Tolpuddle 2020. This festival is brought to you thanks to the generosity of trades unions, the TUC and the help of many volunteers, but we don't ask or expect professional performers to work for nothing. We support the entertainment unions in their campaign to get fair pay for the work they do. So if you can, please support the festival by giving a donation, however small, through the Tolpuddle online shop.
Well, hello and welcome to the Tolpuddle Buy It channel. And Neil, what have you got for us this afternoon?
Well, Tom, we've got this wonderful T-shirt.
Oh, that is really rather nice, isn't
Lovely.
it? So what colour would you call that, Neil?
I would call that aquamarine.
Not blue, then?
Well, it's a bit blue.
It is a bit blue, but aquamarine, it sounds great, doesn't it?
It does.
And it adds an air of sophistication. And what's going on with the design?
I think this is a very clever homage to Zoom meetings that we've all been having lately.
Well, that's fabulous. Let's just have a little look at that. That's this year's Festival Design T-shirt with the Zoom design. And so what do you think something like that would be worth?
£25–30, Tom?
It certainly looks worth that, doesn't it?
It does.
But actually, this T-shirt delivered to your door, £17.99.
That's
and
amazing.
If anything, that's underpriced. So, 1 metre. That's more than a metre. Is that a metre?
It is in old money.
Yeah, well, that's fabulous.
Wonderful.
Have you been in a cloth trade at all?
No.
You're pretty handy with the tape measure, I have to say. That's a nice bit of measuring. Which takes us on to our next article. Another
fantastic segue, if you don't mind me saying.
That's good, yes. Well, we work hard at the Tolpuddle Buy It channel.
We do.
So what have we got here, Neil?
Well, we've got a wonderful new festival design T-shirt.
So that's another T-shirt for the 2020 design?
It is.
So that's the special thing about this year. We've got 2 festival design T-shirts and you can choose. So how would you describe this one?
I would say it was a T-shirt.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a kind of 1950s jazz vibe, would you say, going on?
No.
No. Or more hundreds of thousands.
I would have thought so.
Yeah. But
what I like about this T-shirt, Tom, is the fact that it comes up lovely when it's ironed.
Yeah, you can really see that, can't you?
You can see that on the design.
And this one again, $17.99, delivered to your door.
Cheap at half the price.
Cheap, well, yes, it would be. There's the phone. It's probably an order coming in.
Probably
now.
is.
I bet again.
Take it.
So now, Neil, you're going to tell us about bears.
Oh, okay. This is a lovely reproduction bear, Tom.
So reproduction, what's it actually a reproduction of?
Well, of a real bear.
Of a real bear.
Yeah.
So how's that different to the real one?
Well, the real one, Tom, is much bigger.
Well, that's actually a good thing, though, because we found when we had the real ones, they were very difficult to sell.
And difficult to post.
Very difficult to post. And the T-shirts they wore cost too much money.
Indeed. Now, how much do you think this bear would be, Tom?
Well, if it was a real bear, it would be very expensive indeed. But
yes.
as a classic reproduction, I would say that, again, looks easily worth £15.
You would be wrong.
So how much is that?
Less.
Less. How much less?
£3.50.
No.
That's all it costs.
That is an absolute fabulous bargain. We just see a little bear, 2 eyes, a nose, symmetrical, little T-shirt, £3.50. So now we're just going to talk a bit about DVDs, the little discs with the movies. We've got a good range of movies. If you go to the Tolpuddle website and click on the shop, this one, a very good film, Comrades.
Comrades.
The story of the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
Lovely.
It's a very long film which does justice to the story.
Of course. And this
a work of art.
is Winstanley.
Winstanley, fabulous. I do like that film actually.
So if you're into diggers,
levelers,
and all of that,
yeah,
this is the film for you.
Fabulous. Billy Bragg would like it, wouldn't he?
I would have thought so.
Yeah, I think he's probably got a copy.
That'll do.
That'll do. So what have you got there, Neil?
Well, I'm reading a terrific book, Tom, called The Story of George Lovelace and the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
That's really terrific, and it's worth remembering that on the Tolpuddle website, it's not just T-shirts and cups and bears and water bottles, but we also have books for the discerning reader. And this one, what does that retail at?
I think that goes for $12.99.
$12.99, which is actually a very good price for something that tells you that. And I've got here, you'll see I've managed to get a thicker book. It makes me look much cleverer than Neil. I'm not saying I've actually read it all, but I've read the bit on the back that says what it's about, and it's very clever. Thomas Piketty's Capital. Actually a game-changing book, but as I say, haven't managed to read it myself.
How much does that retail
It isn't a cheap book, just because it's the printing costs and everything, but it's $29.95.
So that does make Thomas Piketty quite a lot of capital.
I think it does. I don't think we can have that in. We can't be undermined.
Why not?
I don't know. Is that okay? Is that okay? It's a good book. It's probably worth it. Thomas Piketty is making money. I don't know. I mean, can we say that? Is that okay? I don't know. I don't know. It's a very important book, and you can get it at the Tolpuddle website.
This is it. The future is here. In 2020, the world changed forever and we've responded.
Key workers put their lives on the line in service of their communities, and the fight for justice gained momentum.
People began to organise.
While the pandemic has threatened our lives, our incomes and our security, the UK's trade unions have become more vital than ever.
Whatever your situation at work, being in a trade union is the best way to protect your job. Be safe.
Get your wages rising, your rights protected, and secure the respect you deserve.
But in order to fight and win for working people, the unions need to grow.
We need to access emerging industries, break into new sectors, and harness the power of technology for a 21st century approach to communication.
So we, and many others, pledge to
recruit more young members,
inspire thousands of activists from all backgrounds to become new workplace reps and train them up.
Work cooperatively as TUC unions to bring trade unionism into new and growing sectors.
Eliminate insecure employment.
To modernise how unions operate, organise and communicate for a digital-first era.
Drive up union membership in workplaces where we already have recognition agreements with employers.
And we will put equality at the heart of everything we do to ensure our movement is genuinely representative of all working people.
When we work together, we grow together and we win together.
So it's time to organise.
So it's time to organise.
So it's time to organize.
So it's time to organise.
Hello again, it's me, Tolpuddle Tom, and this time I'm coming to you from inside the museum. Sadly quiet and empty at the moment, but from August we'll be able to welcome you back in so you can see what's inside. And obviously the museum tells the story of the Tolpuddle Martyrs, their arrest, their trial, the transportation, and their return, their triumphant return back to Britain. And it tells the story of James Frampton, the local magistrate and landowner, who was so adamant he would not tolerate trade union activity in his area. He was prepared to go to all lengths to prevent this happening, to frame an unjust trial. And among other things, we've got these letters here. These letters from Thomas Warren, Reverend Thomas Warren, the Vicar of Tolpuddle. Now these are quite a recent acquisition in the museum, and we're really pleased to have them. Now, Warren has always been a key part of the story. George Lovelace actually wrote about the role of the church on his return in his book, The Church Shown Up. And in particular, it was the kind of his lack of moral fibre, the fact he actually betrayed the martyrs. So Warren himself had earlier actually promised the martyrs that he would support their claim for fair wages. But at the trial, he denied ever having made such a promise. He basically did what Frampton and the landowners told him to do. And there's a lot to suggest with their comfortable living and their vicarages, that the vicars, the Anglican vicars, were kind of under the thumb of the ruling class, essentially administering the will of the establishment. That's certainly the view of George Lovelace and the Methodists at the time. And we knew that Warren was a kind of a traitor, and in a sense, there's something worse about someone who's supposed to be a moral guardian, a moral guide, who actually turns out to have no moral backbone, no integrity whatsoever. But we never knew, until now, we never knew his own internal thinking, his own voice, his own reasons for the things that he did. And these letters, which he wrote, letters dated 1834 from Tolpuddle in Thomas Warren's own hand, and these letters give us some insight into his thinking. And what that insight gives us is a picture of a man who is utterly opposed to trade unions. In his own words, these unions must be put a stop to, or the country will be together by the ears. So he's going beyond just the Tolpuddle story. He is seeing this as the beginning of a movement. So it's not just the trade union movement itself that looks back and says, this is the birth of modern trade unionism. We see that the landowners, the squirearchy, the church, see it as the same. They see that this is the beginning of a vast social and political change taking place, and they're frightened. And we also see him comment on the petition taken to Parliament, the petition to bring the martyrs home. As he says, on Sunday they came to me with a petition so worded that I could not sign it. Last night they came back and broke every pane in my downstairs windows. So we're seeing kind of febrile violence. We're seeing also the church trying to kind of maintain the established order. So these letters, among the other things here, absolutely fascinating insight. So hopefully, not long after the festival, we'll be able to welcome you back, and we really look forward to seeing you here.
I'm in Manchester today with all of these lovely people because we are commemorating the Peterloo Massacre. The Peterloo Massacre was when 60,000 working class people came to Manchester to protest for representation in Parliament. At the time, Manchester didn't have a single MP and most people couldn't vote. Part of a long struggle for democracy, and we think we should take inspiration from the Peterloo protesters because they understood that you couldn't have economic liberation without democratic representation. If we have a proportional voting system so that everyone's represented in Parliament, we can make a society which is in the interests of the whole country and not just swing voters in marginal constituencies. One of the most significant things is that it was working class people swinging behind a movement for democracy. They were all there because they understood they couldn't change their economic conditions without democracy. Inequality is still entrenched in our voting system. For most people, your vote doesn't matter at all, but the value of a vote varies hugely depending on where you live and how you vote. So there is still voter inequality massively embedded in the system. This isn't just an issue of fairness. It's not just one for political anoraks and policy wonks kind of saying, oh, like this isn't fair. It actually has a real bread and butter impact on people's lives.
Hello, I'm Sam Johnson, Director of the Match Girls Memorial, a charitable company we set up in March last year. We work with unions, councils, politicians, academics, museums and communities to raise awareness of the Match Girls story. I was moved to do this by the discovery 3.5 years ago that my great-grandmother Sarah Chapman was one of the leaders of the Match Girls strike in Bow, East London. An immediate and urgent project is to save Sarah's grave, which is threatened with imminent mounding. Prime aim is to secure in the East End a statue and other memorials to honour all of the Match Girls. The Mayor of Tower Hamlets, John Biggs, is supportive and the Council has given us a tour of possible sites. Soon we hope to launch a competition to find a statue design. Thus far we've had a 2-month exhibition in the Tower Hamlets Library, attended several TUCM branch meetings, and also given presentations with tabletop displays at numerous community events. Our first major event was to reproduce the march the Match Girls did the day after the strike. They marched from Bow down to Bouverie Street in London to see Annie Besant. We had around 50 people attending, many in period dress. This was one of the banners that we used on the march. Afterwards, we had a seminar in the nearby Bridewell Centre. We're working with the East End Women's Museum, and we also have close ties with the People's History Museum in Manchester. And they, of course, had their origins in Limehouse in the East End of London. We're exploring the arts through the early and new plays and musicals about the strike, and through poetry and music. We're also working to get the story into schools. This year, we raised the Match Girls profile with a parliamentary campaign for International Women's Day. We distributed awareness ribbons in both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Many were worn and the Match Girls featured in 7 speeches. Please do take a look at our website and help us to achieve our aims. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody. It's this time of year that we normally gather, the trade union movement normally gathers in Tolpuddle to celebrate the story of the Tolpuddle Martyrs. Of course, this year with COVID-19 we're not able to do that. As you can see, we've got into the spirit of things and we've got our own little Tolpuddle here in our back garden. Just wanted to send a message of solidarity from Usdaw to everybody all those workers who've really helped massively during this pandemic. Of course, us door workers, us door members have been at the forefront of that, making sure the nation is fed, and I just want to send out my thanks to all our members who've done an amazing job in really, really difficult circumstances, whether that's working in a shop, working in a food factory, working in distribution centres. Absolutely amazing work that they've done. Of course, the story of the Martyrs will always be with us, but I think this year particularly we'll get more stories of heroism from workers and trade union members. So on behalf of us, I'd like to send a message of solidarity to all trade unionists across the UK. And on Sunday, of course, we'll join the online procession with all our banners and really see that sense of solidarity again from Tolpuddle. So thank you very much and have a great festival.
Thanks to Nick for that great video on behalf of Usdaw, and I think we'd like to add our thanks to all shop workers who've been the fourth emergency service. And thanks to Nick for setting up a little mini Tolpuddle in his back garden. And Nick, it will be great to see you here properly next year.
Yes, and with us requiring to wear masks in shops and stores, the pressure's even more on shop workers. So give them a break, make sure that you're friendly, respect shop workers. Good message from Nick and Usdaw. So we're going to shortly go to the next Zoom, a radical history session. We're going to get a little snippet from John Callow. We're just setting that up now. But before that, we're going to have one song from the great Graham Moore, the singer-songwriter who wrote the musical of Tolpuddle probably 25 years ago now. One of the great songs of that was telling the story of Captain Swing.
The sun's gone down, the shutters drawn, the curfew bell is tolled, the fox is lurking round the barn, the barn owl's wings unfold in the candlelight. Tonight you might hear to your alarm the midnight band of Captain Swing as he rides from farm to farm. All over Dorset the flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I. All over Dorset the flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I. The sheep are safely in their fold, the shepherd deeply sleeps, the ploughman wheels back from his drink, through woods a poacher creeps, the squire retires on bed of grass, with one thing on his mind: if Captain swings his way tonight, there'll be no corn to grind. All over Dorset the flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I. All over Dorset the flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I. The labouring man is on his knees, nowhere can he get hired, since new machines that do the work the farmer has acquired. But how he sweats when he reads the threats on paper morning rings: destroy your gear or else I swear you'll pay, signed Captain Swing. All over Dorset flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I. All over Dorset the flames are burning, who's the cause? Captain, swing on. The sun's gone down, the shutter's drawn, the curfew bell is tolled. Foxes are lurking round the farm, the barn owl's wings unfold in the candlelight. Tonight you might hear to your alarm the midnight band of Captain Swing as he rides from farm to farm. All over Dorset, flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I. All over Dorset, the flames are leaping high. Oh, the ricks are burning, who's the cause? Captain Swing, not I.
You go on like this forever. Did you want me to say anything about your bio? I couldn't find your bio this morning. I was searching around for it in a mad panic.
Oh, you can just say a little bit. You can just say a little bit, Les, just about the fact I've been at the history school for several years. I've written widely on the Labour movement, early modern stuff. Yeah. Just keep it simple. It doesn't need, a big puff.
No. Did you want me to mention this?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, okay.
And actually, you see, we could link it to theory and practice, couldn't we? Which is what I wanted to talk about.
Okay, we are live. We are live now, John. I'm being told we're live. It's my great pleasure to welcome John Callow back to the first Radical History School online. John Callow's been a great supporter of the Radical History School through the years. I first met him after the very first Radical History School, which wasn't the greatest of success as I was concerned, and somebody said I should get John Callow to come along. And I went and found him, and he at that time was had just finished this book, The GMB at Work, the story behind the trade union, the GMB history. I met John in the marquee at Tolpuddle. I asked him if he'd do the next Radical History School. He went down the storm, and we've been inviting him back ever since. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you this morning, John. And just before we start, I thought we might just have a general chat about what you're going to talk about today, which is Jules Michelet, the great French historian who wrote a 1819 volume history of France and a really excellent history of the French Revolution. But beyond that, I think this is about the history of ideas, isn't it? Rather than the sort of general pragmatism of history.
Well, I think the two intertwine, and I think when we're looking at the notion of a radical history school at Tolpuddle, all those things that Tolpuddle does so incredibly well as a festival, as a centre for the British trade union movement, ideas and practice are incredibly important. If we think about the very notion of the word radical, it means getting to the roots of things. And Michelet was one of those people. He was not only a radical politically, but he was radical in terms of getting to the real core of historical problems and ideas. And so many of the things we take for granted today, or in our common language, come from him.
He's really the originator, isn't he, of history from below as well, the history of the people. He began to think about why people were important rather than monarchs, kings and queens and lords and ladies.
Well,
is that true?
Yeah, that's part of his genius. I mean, there were other people around earlier, but he's effectively the one who represents an enormous break with the past. He's not writing for the elites. He works for the elites, but his message is far broader and far more democratic. So he's on that great wave of democratic libertarian impulse that comes out of the French Revolution.
And some people have dismissed him as a romantic because he wrote books about love, about the history of love and different ideas as well. You think that's an unfair criticism of him?
I think it's an easy way to dismiss him. I think that it's something I'm going to talk about in the body of the body of the talk. But it's easy to label people and dismiss everything. Michelet is not romantic in terms of his approach, his language, his elliptical language, his flights of imagination, his gift for language leads him into romance. But even things like his study on love, for instance, are elements where he's playing with ideas and concepts in an incredibly modern way. It's not a history of great men, and it was the history of great men that was being promulgated up until that time. It's the history of thoughts and feelings, and that's one of the reasons that on one hand he can be appropriated by Marxist, socialist historians. Eric Hobsbawm thought a lot of him, for instance. On the other hand as well, Barthes and the postmodernists hail him as a great, forerunner. So he's a man of many seasons, many talents.
Just to change it away from the body of your talk slightly, I'm concerned about the way in which history is taught in schools, the way in which social history has been sidelined, the way in which trade union history has been sidelined. When I left teaching, I wasn't allowed anymore, for example, because of the dreaded national curriculum, to deal with the Tolpuddle Martyrs. How much do you think it's important that we get this history from below out back into schools and education in general?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, because if we don't do it, and by we, I mean true history from below, being written from the perspective of the great bulk of the working population, but also written by the great bulk of the population. If we only get one voice, if we go back to elite histories, we only get one particular version of the story. Think for a moment, if you walk into Waterstones or pick up one of those great fat Sunday supplements of the papers, what we end up with are reviews of enormous, rather turgid and weighty biographies of politicians and alleged statesmen and the odd stateswoman. And it doesn't really get us back, it doesn't get us that far. In fact, what it does do is fold us back onto 19th century discourses. So you're right, the shoehorning of educational curriculum into a few things that basically are about personalities doesn't really help, and it's a retrograde step. In terms of the universities, as they've been marketized, you have a push to degrees that are less theoretical, less rigorous, and are more, touchy-feely, should we say. The other thing to remember about this is that history from below, its rise and its fall, almost directly parallels the strengths and weaknesses of the labour movement. This is a former history that grew out of the trade unions, grew out of the socialist movement, and as the socialist movement has declined, as it's fallen away, so too has the people's histories.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's responsible for us to put it back there.
I think you're right, John. I think it's very important that we get that sort of history back. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think the Tolpuddle History School is so successful in many ways. It's a very unique experience, as I feel, looking around the country. I know that I was asked to do something for Glastonbury, and I said no, because I didn't think I could replicate the sort of general feel that we have at Tolpuddle. And I think the Tolpuddle History School is very important for me in the sort of history that we've looked at over the years. And you've been with me now for the last 10, 12 years, and it's been brilliant. And I've enjoyed, every time we've met, I've really enjoyed your company. I've enjoyed your talks. I'm looking forward to you this morning talking about Jules Michelet. And maybe at the end, we'll come back to how we think we can build on some of these ideas we've talked about at the start of this talk. Would that be all right with you?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to pass over to you, ladies and gentlemen. John Callow, Jules Michelet.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be with you in virtual reality. And at the beginning, I'm going to make a pitch just to pick up from why Tolpuddle is special, and then why Michelet is special, and that the two marry up. Michelet, for those of you who haven't come across him, was an incredibly important figure in the history of ideas and the practice and the effect of writing history. I'll give you some idea of how he was ensconced within the French state and was a historian not only in terms of academia, but in terms of the life of the people and the life of the state itself. Just before the First World War, there was an enormous ironclad warship that was named the Michelet, that was the pride of the French Navy. And that is a fairly strange departure when we think that historians do not normally have weapons of war named after them, or stranger still, that Michelet himself was certainly not interested in militarism or war. In fact, he wrote consistently against it. But what it does, I think, indicate is that Michelet's importance for the reconfiguring of the way France as a nation state thought about itself was incredibly important and incredibly long lasting. That the curriculum, certainly of French schools, at any period after the fall of France in 1870, 1871, up until the First War and even conceivably beyond, was a product of Michelet's life and work and his volumes that made up the history of France. So he's a public actor. He's not a politician. He fights shy of that. He fights shy of that title. But in actual fact, he's working in a political milieu and his works are intensely political. I'm going to give you a little bit of his biography and then we're going to go into his actual ideas. So Michelet spans, he's born in 1798. His father had been a participant in the French Revolution. He'd actually been one of the sans-culottes who were involved in the street fighting. Michelet himself, though, suffers, and he goes on about this at some length. He talks about being raised and having grown up as though he were a weed between the flagstones of the streets of Paris. And that's how he talks about his childhood, his early years, that he was someone who felt that he'd been at the bottom of the social pile. His father's print shop was closed down on the orders of Napoleon. But all the same, Michelet has an incredibly rich background. One of his father's compositors in the print room had been a Jacobin and tells him stories firsthand about the nature of the French Revolution. So it wasn't something learned and it wasn't something rediscovered. It was something vibrant. It was something living in the tradition for Michelet. He's something of a prodigy. He gets scholarship after scholarship. He wins prize after prize. And there is a sense here of the open elite in the early 19th century. Very often the narratives that we're forced to accept today are all this idea that, you know, the self-made people that we ought to aspire to are always the sort of, you know, wheeler-dealer entrepreneurs who made their money through business and industry or share scams or anything like that. However, Michelet is representative of a particular stream within the growing middle class and the growing intelligentsia, who gets there by his intellectual endeavors, to a degree in the service of the state, but in terms of the people who were making and recording the culture around them. And I think it's a significant development in human affairs. Michelet needs patronage. He wins his prizes, he graduates first in his class, he becomes tutor to the princesses of the family of Louis Philippe and the Orleans family. So in that sense, he's an insider. In that sense, he is part of the monarchy that was established in 1830, but he's never really of it. He never loses the idea that he springs from the people. And with Michelet, there is this sense of the people being there in an almost mystical ambience. It's the people he is concerned with. And he talks about, quite late on in his life, the fact that he had gone through various classes, he'd risen in the world, but essentially he's an artisan. That's how he sees himself. And I think this is significant in the way we attempt to understand and attempt to politicize Michelet. He defies easy labels. He's not somebody, you could say, who was part of the upcoming socialist movement, but he is somebody who provides a link with that earlier sense of radicalism from the minor bourgeoisie, from the artisans, from the people who made the French Revolution. And he speaks, I think, with a reflection, with that authentic voice, with that priority. So his message is one that doesn't feed directly so much into the labor movement or into socialism, or certainly not into Marxism, although he does sign a protest against the outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War and against militarism alongside Marx and Engels. He doesn't see himself as a socialist. He does, however, speak of the genesis of the labor and socialist movements, and also of a path and a language that was not taken, that of radicalism in its 18th century, early 19th century milieu. And this is where we have to situate Michelet. He transforms the writing of history. As Les said at the very beginning, we can't think of a people's history, a history of the masses, a history from below, a sense of radical history, without putting Michelet at its apex. Before him, history tended to be the history of great men or great deeds. Michelet absolutely reviles the idea of the medieval chroniclers, people like Froissart. He has a memorable passage where he takes Froissart apart and he says, look, if you read this, you would have no idea that during the period this chronicle is being written, a third of Europe's population died of the Black Death. It doesn't even appear as a little aside in Froissart. These are the deals of the great and the important. And that, in essence, is how history was still being written when Michelet was a young man. If we think even of Voltaire, who in some ways you would have expected to have surpassed these notions, Voltaire's contributions are fairly cringing and cringeworthy. Hagiographies of Frederick the Great, Charles XI of Sweden, and if there ever was a militaristic pair of lunatics, I think you want to look at those two. You know, if you look at Voltaire's appreciation of Charles of Sweden, you have to ask yourself some very searching questions about where Voltaire's head was at that point. Michelet, however, is transcending that. He is not primarily a biographer. So he's working to transform. He's in the business of producing a national epic, a national tapestry for France that begins at the Middle Ages and goes through to the modern day. Now, that's an enormous undertaking. And one of the reasons that I do think Michelet is so very, very important is he is able to entertain grand sweeps of history and grand ambitions in a way that is almost unthinkable to us today. I don't think people are producing or consuming history on the same epic scale that Michelet was dealing with. So he is giving France its history and he is attempting to personify the nation. Now, let's pick this apart. For us today, this is a particularly nefarious, a particularly double-edged project that, of course, today we look at nationalism, particularly on the left.
I am the researcher and the secretary of the Shrewsbury 24
we know
campaign.
where it led to. We know where it
Thank
led
you to the South West GUC
we know where it led
for inviting us to
in
participate in this event.
Serbia, with Croatia,
Today,
with all
we
those
celebrate solidarity with all our brothers and sisters within the trade union and labour movement. Our campaign has attended Tolpuddle for many years to raise awareness about this miscarriage of justice when 6 pickets were sent to prison for picketing during the 1972 National Building Workers' Strike. I am pleased to be able to say to you all that we have been victorious in finally getting the Criminal Cases Review Commission to refer the convictions of the Shrewsbury pickets to the Court of Appeal. This is a magnificent success, not just for the campaign, but for all trade unionists. It's been a long, hard struggle for us. In 2017, over 5 years after we submitted the applications, the pickets case was rejected by the CCRC. We were absolutely devastated, but we never gave up. We challenged the CCRC in court, and it was an uphill battle. But after 2 hearings in 2018 and 2019, we were eventually successful. The CCRC backed down halfway through the judicial review hearing. Finally, on the 4th of March of this year, it agreed to refer the pickets' convictions to the Court of Appeal. The key to our success has been solidarity and support given to us by trade unionists, the Labour Party, and from all other justice campaigners. Please continue to support us by affiliating to our campaign or sending us donations. We are nearly there. Please go to our website for more details. Keep safe. Solidarity.
Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Trade unionists have remembered and celebrated the story of the Tolpuddle Martyrs ever since they returned with free pardons from their transportation in Australia. But after the grand centenary celebrations in 1934, there were still events in Dorset for many weekends, with pageants, sports events, processions through Tolpuddle, and speeches by Labour leaders. But during the war, food production was critical and the agricultural labour force was transformed. The union rallies were suspended for the duration. But in 1946, after the war, there was a long procession behind what was called the Monster Branch Banner of the agricultural workers, unfurled and brought out from its wartime storage. In 1947, some 1,000 people marched and heard Hugh Dalton again speak, but this time he was Chancellor of the Exchequer under a new Labour government. Even more gathered for events in Dorchester, including the German prisoners of war that were still working on the land. A new young organiser had been appointed to cover Dorset agriculture, Arthur Jordan. He was a highly effective organiser for the rapidly growing union, but he was a Communist Party member at the time of growing tensions with the Soviet Union. It was to be an issue that plagued Tolpuddle and the union for the next few years. In 1949, the Tolpuddle rally was marred by communists as some 100 Reds formed up at the rear of the procession. Several branches refurled their banners rather than march with those people. The presence of communists, including the organiser Jordan, rumbled on. But in 1950, about 2,000 people attended. But in 1951, the rally instead was held on a Saturday to remove the danger of action by the Lord's Day Observance Society. It attracted only 200 people. The rallies continued each year, but with small numbers, and there was talk of the National Union of Agricultural Workers withdrawing support nationally. But meanwhile, the local branch mobilised agricultural workers on a tremendous scale. They had regular social events, welfare support. They helped people deal with accidents and awkward employers. They organised annual outings for an astonishing number of people. It was said that 90% of Dorset agricultural workers were now in the union, and the annual holidays, which is what they must have been, would attract nearly 1,000 people in a convoy of coaches going to places like Plymouth, Weston-super-Mare, Forest of Dean, often with a meeting thrown in to meet local union organisers. Working on the land was dangerous and poorly paid, but another constant issue for the union was the issue of housing. Tied accommodation wasn't just provided by paternalistic employers or because farm workers needed to be close at hand. It was a source of power by bosses who could hire and fire but also evict union activists were especially vulnerable, and evictions took place down the ages, fought by activists locally. And still to this day, many villages are still entirely owned by the local landowner, so farm workers had little choice but to take up the accommodation. The 1955 rally was affected by major flooding in Dorset, and fewer than 100 people managed to come and hear Vic Feather speak on behalf of the TUC. In 1957, the rally was cancelled altogether, this time due to a bus strike.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong.
In 1963, the union leadership sacked Arthur Jordan, the Dorset organiser. They claimed he'd spoken out once too often against union policy, and he'd even spoken to Salisbury Trades Council without their permission. The local branch was furious, but as heavy snow fell in 1963, any organised protest was not possible. The union transferred Fred Cole from Cornwall. He was a popular and effective organiser and took on the task of growing the annual rally. Labour leaders joined agricultural workers to march through Tolpuddle and talk about the issues of the day. And as trade unionism became much more centre stage of the way the economy was developing, industrial action rising, and Tolpuddle as an event grew.
Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong. Is there aught we hold in common with the greedy parasite, who would lash us into serfdom and would crush us with his might? Is there anything left to us but to organise and fight? For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
The 60s and 70s saw a rise in shop floor militancy, including amongst engineering workers in Devon. The fine tube strike in Plymouth lasted all of 3 years, and in 1970 strikers from Ottery Switchgear heckled the TUC's Vic Feather for what they claimed was a lack of official union support. In 1971, the Tories were in power under Edward Heath, and the unions were mobilising against the Industrial Relations Bill that they were to eventually defeat. Harold Wilson, the Labour leader, came to Tolpuddle and addressed a massive audience. By his side on the stage, Fred Cole and Oliver Trevitt, the Dorset chair of the Agricultural Committee. When Jack Jones came in 1973, he was able to celebrate a great victory of women workers at the Chelsea Quilt Factory in Barnstable. 1974, the Young Liberals turned up. They were on the march and campaigning particularly against apartheid in South Africa. But in 1977, they stormed the Liberal conference stage with a banner declaring the virtues of the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
All the world that's owned by idle drones for exploit and for greed, we will change and work together, not for profit but for need. If we stand up and be counted, we are certain to succeed, for the union makes us strong. Solid Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Hello everybody, I hope you're enjoying the morning. The history school is a really important, really popular part of the festival, so I'm glad that they're able to join us this year with, again, as usual, amazing subjects. For the rest of the day and for the rest of the weekend actually, we're going to be having things overlapping, so make sure you do check out the timetable of what's going on and that you attend all the things you especially want to. Some of the things are only available on Zoom, the main one being at 12 o'clock. There's a Zoom only session with me and Shami Chakrabarti, the human rights expert, talking about the questions raised by the COVID crisis and how we can ensure the balance is right between human rights to privacy and infection control. She'll be talking about a plethora of issues, from the legacy of austerity on the NHS to inadequate jobs, social housing and food security, the spike in abuse under lockdown and the startling disproportionate impact on the virus on the poorest and BAME communities. You'll also have an opportunity, if you're in that Zoom, to ask her your questions. So please do join us, sign up to the Zoom talk and have your opportunity to talk with Shami Chakrabarti at 12 o'clock today. Next up, we have valuing the public sector workers after the COVID crisis. Now, that's a really important talk as well and something very close to my heart. So please do watch that now and maybe sign up to the Zoom, but that's what we're going to be showing next.
And how the NHS responded, and that's replicated across or in a whole range of other sectors. But at one point at the height of the pandemic, about 90% of the calls and emails we were getting were coming from our members who work in social care. That's how bad it was. Harrowing, heartbreaking calls and emails from people who were worried about the lack of PPE, worried about the impact of them on them and their families, but incredibly worried about the impact this would have on the people they were looking after. And terribly worried, and this continues today, terribly worried about what would happen if they or one of their family members became ill and they had to go off sick and rely solely on statutory sick pay and what impact that would have on them. Workers who before the pandemic were called low skilled, but we know now, or we knew then as well, were anything but low skilled. And we know that being low paid and even being low valued by society doesn't by any stretch of the imagination mean that you're low skilled. And it's our job in the trade union movement to make sure that this isn't forgotten, that the contribution, indeed the sacrifices that people have made are not forgotten. Because if you look at what's happened and I'll just use the care sector again. Social care workers are twice as likely to die as they would be in a similar cohort in the population. So there's something going on in some of these public sectors, the lack of PPE, the lack of support, which makes it more likely that people there will die or be seriously affected by the pandemic. And even today, if you look at what's happening, the government announced additional powers for local authorities. But we know what this actually means. They're giving local authorities powers, but no money goes with it. So who will pay the price of that? It will be the public sector workers who work in local government. So we're demanding in unison, and I'm sure other organisations are, we're demanding a public inquiry into how this government has handled the pandemic. But that's a long-term thing. We know how long some of these things can take just to be set up and to take evidence. What we need to see are some short-term measures, especially as we think might be happening, we go into a second wave. One that actually sees public sector workers valued and rewarded. We need to see some decent pay awards coming up this year and next year for public sector workers. No suggestion that they will be the ones that will pay the price if the country goes into an economic recession as is expected. I mean, one option, why not bring forward every public sector pay award by 3-6 months and make sure that people realise we're doing this to value the work that they've done over the past 3-6 months. Make sure that this contribution and the sacrifices aren't forgotten. In some sectors, demanding that the government do things like set up genuine tripartite partnership working, especially in those sectors that currently don't have it. So again, look at social care, totally fragmented, nothing happens there. You know, even the government ministers, I think, have been shocked at how difficult it is to implement any change or any policies in that sector. So let's look at doing something which actually brings things together for the workforce from the bottom up, where we look at the standards that are needed, the training that needs to go with it, and the pay that should be linked to that. This is not rocket science. We've done this in other sectors. We can do it in these sectors. End the appalling waste. So again, one of the things we want to see after COVID, end the appalling waste that comes from the whole range of outsourcing and all the sort of regulations that go with that in some of our essential services. Why are we spending time and money outsourcing them? And where savings exist in those services, in most of them they don't, but where they do, it comes from the workers and the attack on workers' pay and conditions. So let's, if we see something coming out of this, get rid of all of that structure that goes with it. What's clear is there can be no going back to business as usual. And one of the other key things we need to see out of this is a proper investigation into why so many Black staff were affected, Black workers and the Black community affected by the pandemic. Now, we know that some of the reasons for that, you know, that they're more likely to be in low-paid jobs, they're more likely to be in frontline jobs, which exposes them. They're less likely to raise issues in the workplace because of what they think will be the impact on them. But there needs to be a proper inquiry into that, a proper procedure set up to make sure this is never replicated. It was a shocking indictment of what goes on in our country when we saw the impact on Black staff. So there's a whole range of issues that we could be doing and taking forward. The key is no going back to business as usual. We have to build on the value and the contribution that public sector workers have made and make sure it's never forgotten by this government or indeed any other government going forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. Can I check if everyone can hear me now? Excellent. All right. So sorry for the technical glitches at the beginning, and huge thanks to Gail for stepping in at short notice. Welcome everybody who's just joined us for this session on valuing public sector workers after the crisis. We're talking about how we repay public sector workers for all the sacrifices, huge dedication, hard work and humanity they've shown over the last 5 months, and also talking about what we can do what we as the Labour movement need to do to make sure that ministers don't go back on their promises, to turn those claps into proper appreciation in the long term. our next speaker. So we've just heard from Christina McAnee, the Assistant General Secretary at Unison. We've now got Gail Cartmail, who's just Assistant General Secretary at Unite the Union. Gail is Unite's, as well as being an excellent emergency chair, is Unite's strategic lead for a number of sectors, including construction, finance and legal, energy and utilities, public services, and community, youth and not-for-profit. So over to you, Gail. Thanks very much.
And thanks very much. And I think it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. Such a pleasure to be on this panel with such strong women and our, how can I say, adopted sister Mark. So just to start, 2 lessons from the pandemic. Lesson number 1, there is no such thing as too much public service. I haven't met anybody that thinks there's too much public service. So I start with that. And the second is the stuff that Christina touched on, which is all about values. Obviously valuing the services, the National Health Service, social care, refuse service, but also transport. My union believes, as a transport union, that we should have publicly funded, publicly provided transport system, but also those things that did have to close, libraries and leisure and recreation centres, to name but a couple. Absolutely critical to community cohesion, but also to mental health. And of course, the value we place on key workers, which Christina so eloquently spoke about. So from our perspective, well, my perspective, 3 priorities. First, I think to build on the public appreciation of public service workers and public services. I think you'd have to have had a heart of stone not to have been moved by those moments every Thursday where we left our homes to stand with our communities and celebrate the value of public workers and key workers. Secondly, we need to prepare for austerity, and I'm afraid that will include pay freezes or pay constraints for those workers who have served us so well. And thirdly, I think the best commitment we could make today is to commit to organising. And I just want briefly, if I may, to focus on organising. So the survey that Unite conducted among our social care workers showed in the private sector, the same issues that they cited, PPE, lack of testing and low pay, also came through from those adult social care workers in unionised environments, for example, in housing associations where social care workers support independent living. But the difference was that those respondents had the ability to challenge because they were organised. And we invited them to take up a trade union role, and many responded positively. So what we've proved over the pandemic is that trade unions are a force for good. We promote safety and enforce safety. We promote job security, and we did a huge amount to whip this government into shape to protect workers via furlough. But as Christina said, public services and public sector workers are undervalued. I would suggest that's because the majority are women and disproportionately numerous are Black, Asian and ethnic minority workers who both historically suffer discrimination. Wherever women are dominant in a job role, we can guarantee it will be low paid or lower paid. So in public services, we've set about tackling some of the pay inequalities. So for example, all the unions, Unison, GMB and Unite have campaigned in local government and challenged equal pay. We've talked about the skills that are typically attributed to women. It's what we do anyway. Obviously, we look after people and care for people. So why should that be a skill? But even where you have people in postgraduate roles, they're lesser paid on occasion. So the Enderby case that my union ran for speech and language therapists was about a glass ceiling. Their pay spine was compared to a male-dominated occupation lower. We won that, and we got an equality-proof pay system in its place. But inequalities creep in and are insidious. Oh, somebody's got a dog or an alarm. I'll carry on. During Tolpuddle, it's a time to remember, isn't it, our movement's history. And we remember that in 1834, those who were martyred subsequently did form a trade union. Now, the majority of service workers in the public services, as I've said, and the majority of users are women. So in conclusion, today I'd like not only to reflect on his story, but to reflect on her story. So let's start. 1888, the Brian and May women match workers, 4 and 1, better working conditions. And they then went on to advise dock workers that formed modern day trade unionism in this country. It was the women that taught the men. 1910, the women chain makers of Cradley Heath, home workers who dared to organise and won better pay. And over a 10-year period, they grew the National Federation of Women Workers from a membership of 2,000 to 20,000. And then the Ford machinists, their actions led to the establishment of the Equal Pay Act. The poster behind me on my wall says, "Prepare your daughter for working life. Give her less pocket money than a man." That actually was from the Equal Opportunities Commission several decades ago, and we still have a gender pay gap and job segregation, which is actually dominant in public services. So I think we should celebrate today. I think we should celebrate public service workers and public services, but I think we should also prepare to resist and challenge the inherently sexist values that designate care workers unskilled, and challenge the rampant privatisation that puts profit before people and thrives on institutional inequalities. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Gail. Can I just remind people that once our panellists have finished their introductory words, we will be having a Q&A. So if you'd like to ask a question, please post in the Q&A box if you are watching on Zoom, and it's the Q&A box, not the chat. If you're watching on Facebook, then please leave questions in the comments below. Thanks. And next we've got Mark Sawatka, who's the General Secretary of the Public and Commercial Services Union. Over to you, Mark.
Well, thanks very much, Mary, and greetings to everybody who's watching. 2 fantastic speeches. So I just want to carry on some of the themes that we've heard. In my union, the PCS, we're representing mainly civil servants and public sector workers, but we do have a considerable presence also on government contracts in the private sector. Majority of our members are women, and I entirely concur with the points that Gail made. I mean, we represent some of the people who are really the most forgotten about, but who have also acted heroically in this crisis. Our members in job centres, for example, had to administer a 20-fold increase in universal credit claims, 2.6 million, even though there's 50,000 less of them than there was in the last financial crisis. Our members in HMRC, majority women, have administered the job retention scheme. There are 50,000 of them less than there were in 2008, and 12,000 of them staggeringly are on the national minimum wage, a national scandal if ever there was one. We have members that's kept the prisons running, who have kept our transport systems safe, who have been at our borders and in our ports and in our airports, in our museums and galleries, and have kept the justice system running. Most of these are low paid, majority of them are women, and the majority of them are massively undervalued. And I want to tip my hat to all of them for the fantastic efforts they've made, as well as all our other colleagues across the whole of the public sector. I mean, I also want to say, I don't want to be controversial, but I think if ever the price of the failure for Labour to win the general election has been most easily seen, it's been in the catastrophic handling of this crisis by the government. I believe there are people who have died, sadly, who would not have died had we had a more competent government in place. And I agree with Christine, we need a public inquiry because people must be held to account, because frontline workers have lost their lives because they didn't have PPE, the crisis in our care homes, the going late into lockdown, and frankly, the confusion around every announcement, which I believe is deliberate, shifts the blame from government onto individuals and employers, and it is a scandal. We have needed so much better in a national crisis, and sadly, we have not had it. And that's why I think that whilst we can talk about valuing public service after the pandemic, my union very much believes we are far from through this pandemic. We listen to the health advisors. We all know we're preparing for a second wave in the winter, and we've got to learn the lessons. And our frontline public sector workers need support, and they need it now. And I don't believe they will get that from this government unless we can force them to do more than clap on a Thursday. So my key messages are, where we've had strong trade unions, people have been better looked after than where we have no trade unions. And we have seen that by keeping people safe. We have seen that for providing for people when they've had a union to go to. So in my own union, the majority of people have worked from home because of a decisive intervention from the union at the beginning. But we have also had tens of thousands who have worked right the way throughout. And therefore, what I really want to say now is that if we want the true value that our members deserve to be forced for the government to show it, we will have to organise together, and we will have to be prepared to say what the government won't want to hear and be prepared to demand, not ask, but demand proper treatment. What does that look like? It must mean fair pay. I agree entirely with Christina. The government is clearly heading potentially for a pay freeze for public sector workers, but even before we get there, we've just had pay offers in the civil service that represent the 11th consecutive year of real terms pay cuts. We need justice on our pensions. People may not have seen it, but they sneaked an announcement out the last 2 days ago that actually is appalling if you look at it, because what they're saying is their illegality that they are now forced to put right by discriminating against public sector workers will be paid for by public sector workers themselves. They have lifted the suspension on their pension valuation, but they're going to redo it. In other words, they won't pay the price to put the illegality right. Scheme members. What an outrage that is. You know, the person who has broken the law will ask the victims of that breach to pay for their mistake. We have to get pensions justice. But you know, we also have to demand more resources. The public service has been starved of resource, and in a post-Brexit world, we need more public sector workers in our councils, health service, schools, civil service, right across the board. We need to invest in those jobs. And yet, at the moment, we have a government that is currently making nearly 3,000 staff in HMRC redundant because they're carrying through plans to close offices that they decided to go down 5 years ago. So what does that mean in finishing? It means that to get fair pay, pensions, and the resource we need to get people back working in-house, because here's a statistic for you, proportionately in the civil service, more workers died who were working for private contractors than public servants in the civil service, and overwhelmingly they were black staff. The cleaners, the caterers, the security guards, the people the government never takes any notice of, paying the ultimate price. They should be in-house, and they should be getting 100% sick pay, not £19.71 a day on statutory sick pay the government wants them to have. And so I want to finish with this message. You would think, wouldn't you, in this crisis, the government wouldn't go back to business as usual. But you know what? We are currently balloting 200 private sector workers in the Tate because they are threatening pay cuts, redundancies, and pension cuts. It's part of a crisis across the culture sector of underfunding that will see thousands of people suffer. So my message is we work together. If they're making all of us pay for their pensions illegality, the unions must work together to stand up for fair pensions. It should be the same on pay. But also, I'll leave you with this thought, that this government has retreated from our communities at a breathtaking speed. The post-war consensus that you needed high-skilled public sector jobs in every community, not just cities, not just in the southeast, has been broken. And the government has made promises in the last election to many seats that it's won, yet they are currently closing offices and making staff redundant in those very seats. So what I say is this, that in this pandemic, we've shown people can work from home, people can use technology, people are needed on the high street, and relocation of jobs from London cannot just be about Edinburgh, Manchester and Leeds, as important as they are. They must be about Preston, the Fylde Coast, Cornwall, the Highlands of Scotland. In other words, what we have to say is public sector workers are needed in every community, in every part of the UK. And one of the ways to stop this economic recession that looks like it's coming is to ensure that we have highly skilled public sector jobs in every part of the United Kingdom. That's a big ask. We know we deserve it. We know we're unlikely to get it. So pledging to organise and campaign together is the real way that our frontline members will really get what they deserve. And on behalf of my union, I want to pledge to work with all my colleagues on this panel to try to deliver that in what are going to be difficult months ahead. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. We'll go straight into our next speaker, who is Rahan Azam from the GMB. Rahana leads the GMB Public Services section, which means she's a lead on local government pay bargaining and has been coordinating the GMB's industrial response to COVID-19. And she's also one of the trade union movement's most senior BME women. So over to you, Rahana.
Thank you, Mary. And I think we're still good morning. So can I just say I'm first-time speaker at Tolpuddle. So thank you for the opportunity. And I bring solidarity to all joining us in the virtual world on Facebook from our union, the GMB. And as we connect today, it's great to know we did have a massive win this week on public sector pensions. You know, we were told that our members were living longer, so they had to work longer. We were told that our members had gold-plated pensions, so they had to pay more but get less out. We all resisted the public sector pension reforms, but we faced a united coalition government, two parties with one goal: to smash the public sector. But when the first pension valuations of the new public sector schemes showed a surplus, it revealed the lie behind the claim that our members were living longer. Under the new scheme rules, any surplus would go back to our members in improved pension benefits. But when the government saw the billions that our members had paid in, their eyes grew bigger, their mouths started to water, and they tried to squirrel it away for themselves, robbing 4.4 million workers of £2.4 billion. The GMB launched the Unpause the Pause campaign, and by building solidarity and support with our fellow unions, we jointly called for the pause to be lifted. And this week we've seen the government was made to lift that pause, and it shows what unions can achieve when they work together in solidarity. But while this means the 2.4 billion surplus should now be redistributed back to our hardworking public sector workers who earned it, the government are now saying, as Mark said, that they'll need our members' money to pay for their discrimination. You know, it's like the government think their custody over our members' earning gives them some sort of carte blanche to spend it. No doubt thinking about the lovely tax cuts they could fund for their mates, the billionaire bosses and the dodgy landlords. Well, let me say this, not on our watch. If this crisis has proven anything, it's that the workers power the economy. When workers aren't working, everything comes to a halt. All of your enterprising, your Zuckerbergs, your Bezos and Bransons, your Musks and your Trumps, they might be dreaming their little dreams, but without us, they'd be sat on their little hands, all of them without a pit to hiss in. It's the working class that have gone above and beyond during this pandemic. Our NHS staff, our care staff, retail staff, our factory workers. It's the working class that have kept our communities safe, fed and looked after. But at the same time, the levels of inequality we have seen and experienced have never been clearer. I've spent 2 decades as a union organiser. Throughout my working life, I have come to understand the structural issues and challenges facing people from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background across our workplaces and institutions. And it has been well understood for some time now that people of a BAME heritage have been disproportionately affected. The coronavirus outbreak has exposed fundamental inequalities and institutional discrimination in the UK's economy and society. And it breaks my heart each week to hear the roll calls of the dead read out and see in each face the stark inequalities that exist in our society and communities. They say this virus doesn't discriminate, yet we know our society, our systems, our institutions, our policies and practices, and our economy do. After the death of Stephen Lawrence, post Macpherson, we were going to build an inclusive Britain, eliminate unlawful discrimination, and make our institutions fit for purpose. You know, audits were carried out, recommendations were tabled, but many have forgotten why we had to amend the Race Relations Act back in 2000. There's been a serious breach of trust and confidence in this government. It's either the government can't or it won't protect people from all backgrounds. And we, your unions, are working together to hold this government to account. In the first days of this crisis, we were calling for a people's bailout, guarantee wages, protect people and save lives. We led the call for the publishing of the government's equality impact assessment to the pandemic. We revealed that the scope of their review into the pandemic had been intentionally narrowed to avoid dealing with the uncomfortable truths about race and class in Britain. And we told government and Michael Gove a few weeks ago straight that their response to Dr. Fenton's report was a complete and utter car crash. And the last thing we needed was more reviews that make no recommendations, no remedy, and provide no recourse to safety or justice. We are organising for a public inquiry into this titanic disaster that this government's incomprehensible actions have caused, and which they've watched over with cavalier disdain. You know, when we needed them most, it was our public sector workers showed this country their mettle. We are going to make damn sure that their sacrifice is repaid in full. And the GMB's goal for public sector workers are the same today as they were before the crisis. Our Go Public priorities are campaign for public service funding, because we need to future-proof our public services. Secondly, we need to challenge outsource and privatisation. And as others have already said, the pandemic has shone a light on what we've always known. There is no room for profit in our public services, and we demand paid justice. Just take our care workers, predominantly women, highly skilled, chronically underpaid. We demand justice for our care workers and for all our workers. And we need to celebrate the role of public service workers beyond the clapping, a solid recognition of the value of our key workers, and building public services that are fit for the future. And we can achieve this together. We can grow together. Over the past few months, we've seen a renaissance in union membership. More women are joining than ever before. We are their movement, we are your movement, we are one movement, and we are united. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Rohana. Just a quick reminder for those watching, if you'd like to ask a question to any of our panellists, please post in the Q&A box on Zoom or in the comments if you're watching on Facebook. Thank you. And over to our last, but certainly not our final but not least speaker, Rachel Reeves, who's the MP for Leeds West and is Labour Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which means she's Shadow Minister for the Cabinet Office and shadows the work of Michael Gove. Over to you, Rachel.
Thanks very much, Mary. And I can't say what a privilege it is to be on a panel with such amazing trade union leaders. So thank you very much for inviting me here today. I think the last four speakers have all shown that if we didn't have a trade union movement today, we sure as hell would need to create one. And the work that you and your members have done during this crisis to provide the dignity, the decency and the services that we've all relied on so much. I just want to say on behalf of the Labour Party and all of our members and supporters, thank you so much for everything that you and your members have done, whether it is on prioritising health and safety, on prioritising employment rights, campaigning for proper statutory sick pay. All of those things have made a difference during this crisis, and made a difference not just to your members, but to the wider community of people who work in public service and also doing all key work across the economy and society. And as others have said so eloquently, those who have been underappreciated and undervalued, that needs to change. And we can't go back, as Mark has said and as others have said, to business as usual after this crisis. I think there's much in the world of 2020 that the Tolpuddle Martyrs of 1834 would struggle to understand, but I also think there are many similarities that they would understand far too well. The union-busting firms who prioritise profits over people, the zero-hour contracts that make it so difficult for so many people to plan for the future, the migrant workers in Leicester who are paid just a few pounds an hour to produce multi-million or billion-pound profits for firms, and also those people who are sent to work, particularly in the public sector right now, not adequately protected to do their jobs that they're doing, and as Rohanna and others have said, putting their lives on the line to protect all of us. All of that would be recognisable. But I think also the common decency of the British people would be recognisable to the Tolpuddle Martyrs. When we went out on our doorsteps to clap on those Thursday evenings, those are the forebears of all of us were there petitioning and campaigning and demonstrating and marching in support of the Tolpuddle Martyrs in 1834. So I think those shared traditions and also the shared values across the centuries ring out. As Mary has said, my job in the Shadow Cabinet is to shadow Michael Gove, and that gives me the privilege perhaps of shadowing possibly the least popular member of the Cabinet, especially amongst trade union members and anyone who has ever worked in a school, and being the proud daughter of two former teachers and NUT as it was members, I share that loathing. I've been trying to highlight in my role in the last 3 months or so some of the real challenges that the Cabinet Office, which I shadow, is responsible for, exposing the shortages of PPE and the failure of government to work with British businesses, manufacturers and textile companies to produce the PPE in the quantities that your members needed and were denied on the front line. Exposing the dodgy outsourcing contracts delivered to friends of the Conservative Party and their advisors. The Tory attitude, as Mark Sawatka has said, to the civil service and the extent to which the government are trying to politicise roles in the civil service. Also exposing the Brexit chaos, which is unfolding around us and will become even more apparent as we move into January of next year, and also demanding that any trade deal that Britain signs protects the very highest standards of workers' rights, environmental rights, consumer rights and animal welfare standards, which the government promised, but I don't think any of us have any confidence at all that they will deliver on. Beyond that, Keir Starmer has asked me to do work on what we can learn from the coronavirus and what it will mean for the future economy and society. As he said in his speech when he was elected leader of the Labour Party, those who alert last must be first. And I think that's a philosophy that we can all sign up to. Those who have been underappreciated, underpaid and undervalued, we can't go back to that. We have learned something during this crisis. All of us on this panel already knew, but is becoming increasingly apparent, I hope even in the corridors of powers. Somebody on the panel earlier said that At the beginning of this crisis, some people said that coronavirus was the great leveller and it didn't discriminate between rich and poor, young and old, black or white. And we have seen that that is absolutely not the case. In Leeds West, where I'm an MP, there are 26 blocks of high-rise flats. Many people have no access to outdoor space. Domestic violence and sadly child neglect are on the rise in my community and in many others. And in a constituency where average earnings are already just 2/3 of the national average, nearly half of the children in my constituency are growing up in poverty. And we know that it is the people who already had the least who are suffering most during this pandemic. And the idea that this is some great leveller is just a great travesty. So let me just make a couple of short observations about valuing public sector workers. First of all, public services and public sector workers cannot be the casualty of this crisis. We've seen their value. We've applauded them on Thursday nights. We can't go back to business as usual, and we certainly can't go back to the austerity that we've seen over the last 10 years. We also can't go back to a model of outsourcing. More services should be insourced and run with public values at their heart. When I chaired the Business Select Committee during the course of the last Parliament, I ran the inquiry into the collapse of Carillion. But Carillion wasn't just one bad apple in the outsourcing cart. It was systemic and endemic within the system. The CEO of Serco recently said that he wanted to cement the position of the private sector in the NHS. Well, that might be what he wants, but it's not what we want, and it's not what the British people want either. And we can't go back to that model. Thirdly, delivering public services is not like delivering pizza. Public services are about people, and metrics and KPIs and performance tables misses something of the essence of what public services are. The NHS isn't just a logo to sell to the highest bidder, and that must change as well. Fourth and finally, public services can help all of us and all of our communities, and perhaps the most deprived communities the most, to thrive and fulfil their potential. Cutting public services cuts the abilities of communities and individuals and families to thrive and fulfill their potential. We need greater transparency in how public services are run, and we need public services to be run in-house. Yet Tory ministers view transparency and accountability a little bit like Dracula views sunlight and garlic. We need openness, and we need public services to work together to tackle the collective challenges that we face as a society and in our communities. So to conclude, our country values its public services, and we've seen that more in the last 4 months than I think at any time within any of our lifetimes. But we need a new settlement for public services and the people who work to deliver them. We can and we must build a broad and a winning coalition together in the Labour movement, and we will do this together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rachel, and to all of the panellists. We'll now go into Q&As. Now I'm picking these up from various streams, but it's not too late if those watching want to post more. So I suggest I give the questions in groups of 3 and we give everyone a chance to answer them, and hopefully we'll have time for a couple of rounds. So Rob from Liverpool says, how do panellists rate the chances that this government will seek to do more austerity before the parliamentary term is out? And how can we learn the lessons of the fight against austerity since 2010 to do better this time? Richard Worth says, as Rahana has said, the pandemic has shown that it's workers that run society. Without key workers, nothing would get done. As the Tories move to make us pay for the crisis by reducing terms and conditions, will unions coordinate to strike together to defend jobs, pay and pensions? And then Paul, no more information, says, can we encourage local authorities to use their commissioning policies to promote better terms and conditions for workers in care homes and domiciliary care? So I'll give you a couple of minutes, or I'll give you a moment to take those in, but shall I suggest that we go in reverse order, just to mix things up a bit? So Rachel, if you come in first, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that the question about austerity and how to fight it and learning lessons from the last 10 years. Look, I mean, over the last 10 years and the three elections that we've had since the Tories came in 2010, Labour have lost every election. So we do need to learn lessons and need to build a better narrative of how to challenge austerity. And I think that this crisis and this pandemic has really opened people's eyes to what has happened in our public services after over the last 10 years, that they've been hollowed out. And whether it's our NHS, which has fewer beds than I think at any time in its history, we've got fewer intensive care beds than almost any country in Europe, and at local authority level, there is absolutely no slack to deal with what we have experienced over the last few months. And I think it's telling that the vast majority of people do not want to go back to what we've experienced over the last 10 years. So I think we need to tell a story about this crisis and what it's shown us about the society we live in, but also link it very clearly to the decisions and policies of the Conservatives over the last 10 years in a way which, you know, we probably haven't done well enough so far if you measure success on how people vote. And as Mark said, you know, it is people in the constituencies that the Conservatives won at the most recent election that have lost most and stand to lose even more from Conservative governments, and yet they've turned away from Labour. So I think we do need to use the narrative and the lessons from this crisis to fight against austerity with everything we've got on this occasion. And there was another question that I'll just touch upon before allowing other people to come in. Without key workers, the second question said, nothing would be done. And I talk about, and I have done for the last few years, the everyday economy, without which the rest of society and the economy would not be able to function. And too often people who work in the everyday economy, whether that is health and social care, supermarket workers, distribution workers, people who work in our schools, too often they have been underappreciated and undervalued. And after clapping on Thursday nights and on the anniversary the other week of the creation of the NHS, we do need to recognise the value of key workers. And you know, the Marcus Rashford campaign about and the Labour campaign about free school meals. You know, there are some football players who have done amazing things during this crisis to put issues on the table. But the inequalities of wages that we see in our society don't match up at all with how we value what different people produce and give back. And we do need a reckoning and a reconciliation that people who work hard, who go out every day and deliver the services upon which all of us depend and all of our lives, as it happens, depend on, should be paid more than they're paid today, and that we must ensure that we learn the
Oh, go on then. Okay.
Are we good?
Oh my God, you smiled. It's amazing. We're good. Yeah, go.
Follows you back home. I'm a street light shining. I'm a warm light blinding bright, burning off alone. It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give again.
It's times like these we learn to love again.
It's times like these, time and time again.
And I'm a new day rising. I'm a brand new start.
I'm living by day. Do I stay or run away? Leave it all behind. It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again. I'm a one-way motorway. I'm the one that drives away, then follows you back home. I'm a street light shining.
I'm a wildlight blinding bright, burning off alone.
It's times like these you learn to live again. It's times like these you give and give again. It's times like these you learn to love again. It's times like these, time and time again. It's times like these you learn to live again.
And it's times like these you learn to love again.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. It was just a bit of a project for some of the staff at the North West Ambulance Service, something positive to focus on in these difficult times. If you did like it, please feel free to donate on the link below, Just Giving page. It's for the North West Ambulance Service charity, which is there to support its staff. Thank you very much and stay safe.
The 150th anniversary of the trial of the Tolpuddle Martyrs in 1984 arrived just as trade unions were fighting for their lives against an attack by employers and government. Print workers had lost the messenger dispute, civil service unions were banned from GCHQ, and the miners' strike was underway. A large crowd came to the tiny Dorset village. It didn't start well for Len Murray, the TUC General Secretary. He was rushed into hospital, not feeling well. A new tree was planted from the seed of the Martyrs' sycamore, under which farm workers debated how to resist further pay cuts 150 years before.
There's power in a factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand there. must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of mud, war has always been the boss's way, sir. The union forever defending our rights, down with the black legal workers unite, with our brothers and our sisters from many far off lands. There is power in our union. Now I long for the morning that they realise brutality and unjust laws cannot defeat us. But who'll defend the workers who cannot organise when the bosses send their lackeys out to cheat us? Money speaks for money, the devil for his own. Who comes to speak for the skin and the bone? What a comfort to the widow, a light to the child. There is power in our union.
The rally ended with speeches from the ramshackle stage in the field. Oliver Trevitt, chair of the Dorset Agricultural Workers, was joined by Norman Willis, TUC Deputy General Secretary, and Neil Kinnock, leader of the Labour Party.
The union forever defending our rights, down with the black metal workers unite, with our brothers and our sisters, together we will stand. There is power in our union.
That we come here to mark the memory of the Tolpuddle Martyrs and everything that they stood for. This summer in Britain is still ruled by those who are the descendants of those who controlled this part of Britain and the class that ran Britain in 1834. The people who were trying even then to strangle trade unionism at birth, to kill democracy in its very infancy. Will these people ever learn? For it is just 150 years since in this sunlit valley, the people here knew what it was to face the bland injustice, to face those who used their legal power for the suppression of natural rights. There is that close bond of knowledge that the only way in which we honor truly the memory of the martyrs is to ensure that those who are today's martyrs know our solidarity and our support here and everywhere else.
Hi everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this virtual Tolpuddle Festival. It really has been a worrying time for everyone. Everyone at Thompson's would like to say a huge thank you to those involved in providing key services during this pandemic. Our thoughts now turn to those whose jobs are under threat. Thompson's will be there for you and there with you. As a firm, we had to move quickly, going from having a handful of staff working from home to literally hundreds. It was a challenge, but our staff have been fantastic. And pulling together, we have been able to work from home during this pandemic. We are proud that Thompson's negotiated a protocol with the Association of British Insurers, not normally our friends, and this has been adopted UK-wide. This has meant that files are progressed, cases have settled, sometimes for millions of pounds, and importantly, we have been there for our clients. The trade union movement has never been more important than it is now. The Tolpuddle Martyrs will be proud of how the movement across the world has stood up and stood by its members and the principles of fairness at this very difficult time. At Thompson's, we are proud to be working with the union movement in their memory, in solidarity and building a better world. So thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this today, and I look forward to seeing you in real life when it is safe to do so. Thanks.
Across Britain, millions of workers are out serving our communities and trying to keep safe during the pandemic.
Around 12 million of us don't have rights to full sick or isolation pay.
If we get a cough or a fever or lose our sense of taste and smell, or someone we live with gets these symptoms or get told to isolate by track and trace, then at best we get £95 and 85 pence a week.
No one can afford to live off £95.85 a week. For a minimum wage worker, that's less than a third of take-home pay.
Statutory sick pay, £94 a week.
Not enough.
You
Not
couldn't
enough.
live on that. I don't think any of us could.
Some of us can afford to take a financial hit, but many of us won't. So we keep coming into work because we have no other choice.
If workers are out and about when they should be self-isolating, that increases everybody's risk of getting the virus.
Our lack of decent sick pay isn't just a problem for us. It's a major public health problem. Unless everyone has job security and basic rights at work, the virus will spread quicker. Many more people will die.
Alongside and included within these 12 million workers with no occupational sick pay are 1 million workers on zero-hour contracts, 1.4 million workers with no recourse to public funds, and 2 million workers in the informal sector with no rights whatsoever. If we're serious about slowing the spread of this virus, then all workers need decent terms and conditions and job security. We need a massive levelling up across the workforce.
Safe and Equal campaign is an organisation of key workers and trade unionists organising to win full isolation pay and full sick pay for all. Join your union, organise your workmates and demand full sick pay and self-isolation pay for all.
Statutory sick pay, £94 a week.
Not enough. Not
You
enough.
couldn't live on that. I don't think any of us could.
No.
Well, hello and welcome to the Tolpuddle Buy It channel. And Neil, what have you got for us this afternoon?
Well, Tom, we've got this wonderful T-shirt.
Oh, that is really rather nice, isn't
Lovely.
it? So what colour would you call that, Neil?
I would call that aquamarine.
Not blue, then?
Well, it's a bit blue.
It is a bit blue, but aquamarine, it sounds great, doesn't it?
It does.
And it adds an air of sophistication. And what's going on with the design?
I think this is a very clever homage to Zoom meetings that we've all been having lately.
Well, that's fabulous. Let's just have a little look at that. That's this year's Festival Design T-shirt with the Zoom design. And so what do you think something like that would be worth?
£25, £30, Tom?
It certainly looks worth that, doesn't it?
It does.
But actually, this T-shirt delivered to your door, £17.99.
That's
and
amazing.
If anything, that's underpriced. So, 1 metre. That's more than a metre. Is that a metre?
It is in old money.
Yeah, well, that's fabulous.
Wonderful.
Have you been in a cloth trade at all?
No.
You're pretty handy with the tape measure,
I
I
am.
have to say. That's a nice bit of measuring. Which takes us on to our next article. Another
Fantastic segue, if you don't mind me saying.
That's good, yes. Well, we work hard at the Tolpuddle Buy It channel.
We do.
So what have we got here, Neil?
Well, we've got a wonderful new festival design t-shirt.
So that's another t-shirt for the 2020 design.
It is.
So that's the special thing about this year. We've got 2 festival design t-shirts and you can choose. So how would you describe this one?
I would say it was a t-shirt.
Yeah, it's got a bit of a kind of 1950s jazz vibe, would you say, going on?
No.
No. Or more hundreds of thousands.
I would have thought so.
Yeah.
But what I like about this t-shirt, Tom, is the fact that it comes up lovely when it's ironed.
Yeah, you can really see that, can't you?
You can see that on the design.
And this one again, $17.99, delivered to your door.
Cheap at half the price.
Cheap, well, yes, it would be. There's the phone. It's probably an order coming in.
Probably
now.
is.
I bet again.
Take it.
So now, Neil, you're going to tell us about bears.
Oh, okay. This is a lovely reproduction bear, Tom.
So reproduction, what's it actually a reproduction of?
Well, of a real bear.
Of a real bear.
Yeah.
So how is that different to the real one?
Well, the real one, Tom, is much bigger.
Well, that's actually a good thing, though, because we found when we had the real ones, they were very difficult to sell.
And difficult to post.
Very difficult to post. And the t-shirt they wore cost too much money.
Indeed. Now, how much do you think this bear would be, Tom?
Well, if it was a real bear, it would be very expensive indeed. But
Yes.
as a classic reproduction, I would say that, again, looks easily worth £15.
You would be wrong.
So how much is that?
Less.
Less. How much less?
£3.50.
£3.50.
That's all it costs.
That is an absolute fabulous bargain. We just see a little bear, 2 eyes, a nose, symmetrical, little t-shirt, £3.50. So now we're just going to talk a bit about DVDs, the little discs with the movies. We've got a good range of movies. If you go to the Tolpuddle website and click on the shop, this one, a very good film, Comrades.
Comrades.
The story of the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
Lovely.
It's a very long film which does justice to the story.
Of course. And this
a work of art.
is Winstanley.
Winstanley, fabulous. I do like that film, actually.
So if you're into diggers,
levelers,
and all of that,
yeah,
this is the film for you.
Fabulous. Billy Bragg would like it, wouldn't he?
I would have thought so.
Yeah, I think he's probably got a copy.
That'll do.
That'll do. So what have you got there, Neil?
Well, I'm reading a terrific book, Tom, called The Story of George Lovelace and the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
That's really terrific, and it's worth remembering that on the Tolpuddle website, it's not just t-shirts and cups and bears and water bottles, but we also have books for the discerning reader. And this one, what does that retail at?
I think that goes for $12.99.
$12.99, which is actually a very good price for something that tells you that. And I've got here, you'll see I've managed to get a thicker book. It makes me look much cleverer than Neil. I'm not saying I've actually read it all, but I've read the bit on the back that says what it's about, and it's very clever. Thomas Piketty's Capital. Actually a game-changing book, but as I say, I haven't managed to read it myself.
How much does that retail
It isn't a cheap book, just because it's the printing costs and everything, but it's $29.95.
So that does make Thomas Piketty quite a lot of capital.
I think it does. I don't think we can have that in. We can't be undermined.
Why not?
I don't know. Is that okay? Is that okay? It's a good book. It's probably worth it. Thomas Piketty is making money. I don't know. I mean, can we say that? Is that okay? I don't know. I don't know. It's a very important book, and you can get it at the Tolpuddle website.
We are the West Dorset branch of Animal Aid. We've been running our stall every year at Tolpuddle since 2013. So why aren't we in the beautiful surrounds of Tolpuddle this year? Because of a pandemic, which came from animals and caused devastation, as did many diseases before. SARS, MERS, bird flu, swine flu, all came from animals, and many more will in the future unless we change our relationship with animals. The Centre for Disease Control has said 3 in 4 of the world's new or emerging infectious diseases come from animals. But we need to change our ways not just for ourselves, but also because we have a moral responsibility. If you ask people, are they against animal cruelty? Usually the answer would be yes. And yet most people every day are complicit in the suffering of animals in farming, experiments, clothing, entertainment, etc. It's not only animals which are being exploited in this industry. People working in slaughterhouses are some of the most vulnerable people doing work that no one else wants to do, and many suffer from mental health problems and trauma. So if we want to live by our principles, can we carry on living like this and turning a blind eye to their suffering? A vegan diet is proved to be more healthy than a vegetarian or omnivore one, and it is the best way to save the planet's resources, as 77% of farming land is for animal agriculture, and about 1/3 of the world's water consumption is for producing animal products. To find out more about leading a cruelty-free lifestyle, visit our Facebook page Animal Aid West Dorset or the Animal Aid or Viva websites, or start your vegan journey with help and support from challenge22.com. There are now over 2.2 million vegans in the UK, and when asked, their only regret is they didn't do it sooner.
Hello and greetings to everybody at the Tolpuddle Festival from all of us in the Stop the War Coalition. My name's Lindsay German, I'm the convener of the coalition. It's an organisation which has been going for nearly 2 decades, very, very long time, since the war in Afghanistan first started back in 2001. We've always been very, very pleased to get the support of the vast majority of trade unions in this country and of many, many individual trade unionists. And we rely very much on that connection in terms of allowing us to extend our influence, allowing us to get publicity for the things that we're campaigning around. And I thank you for all that support in the past and hope that we will get it in the future. I think this is particularly important because we're facing a very big crisis at the moment, domestically and internationally, over the pandemic, over the threat to jobs and the economy, but also over the growing military tension in the world and the threats of war that we're seeing, particularly longer term between the US and China, but also as we talk, there are conflicts over in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen, and of course in Palestine, where this week Israel is threatening to annex large parts of the West Bank. So these are all issues which are very real issues, and to me, you can't separate them out. You can't separate out the questions of war and the money that this country spends on war and weapons with the domestic agenda. These two things go hand in hand, and why are we spending billions on war and weapons when we have an underfunded health service, where our school class sizes are too big, where we have a housing crisis and many, many other issues that affect us domestically? So just to say to you, solidarity. I hope you'll do everything you can to continue to support Stop the War. You can join us, you can donate, you can go to our website, www.stopwar.org.uk. But most importantly, I hope that you will bear in mind and continue to support these kind of arguments, and that we see our world not just as one where we improve things for people here in Britain, but also a world where we end wars, where we have peace and equality and justice as the kind of norm in international relations, and that we don't have the continuing imperialist wars, the major powers, nuclear weapons, all of these things. So thank you very much for your support. Have a great festival, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon.
This is the continuing story of the annual rally to remember the Tolpuddle Martyrs. But the 1990s were hard for trade unions. The Conservatives clung to power despite turmoil over the poll tax, the economy and Europe. Industrial restructuring, human resource management and anti-union laws made it hard to recruit new members, and unemployment devastated many communities. Trade union and labour leaders made the pilgrimage to Dorset each July, but the banners got fewer and the marchers got older. Less people now worked on the land, and the old Agricultural Workers' Union, now part of the Transport and General Workers' Union, was a diminishing force. But the yearly reunion of stalwarts still paid tribute to the memory of the Tolpuddle Martyrs and all they stood for. In 1997, as the New South West Regional Secretary of the TUC, I had the honour to lead the organisation of the Tolpuddle Rally, and I knew we could create an event that felt more like a celebration of trade unionism. With the help of Dick Musket and the Workers' Beer Company, we offered food and drink and more music for all the family. Labour was in power, and although there was a new mood of confidence, unions knew they would have to work hard to make the most of it. They pressed for radical reforms to the economy, employment law, and for big investments in public services. The refreshed Tolpuddle Festival suited the moment and reflected a spirit of optimism and fun, but it kept the traditional elements of the annual rally. Making the journey to Tolpuddle didn't have to be out of a sense of duty, but something to look forward to and enjoy with your mates and family. It recharged people's batteries and inspired new recruits and old stalwarts. Plans were made to extend the Sunday afternoon event to the Saturday, maybe even offer camping. We wanted Tolpuddle to be a highlight in the calendar of the labour movement, and one that kept alive the memory of the Tolpuddle Martyrs.
Welcome to Tolpuddle 2020. This festival is brought to you thanks to the generosity of trades unions, the TUC and the help of many volunteers, but we don't ask or expect professional performers to work for nothing. We support the entertainment unions in their campaign to get fair pay for the work they do. So if you can, please support the festival by giving a donation, however small, through the Tolpuddle online shop.
Well, I hope you're enjoying the variety, the mixture. Hope you're enjoying the mixture of stuff this morning. There's lots more to come. The next big session is going to be Building Back Better, but there's lots more besides happening. We're going to have a short break now, but just to say what's happening, there's films going on. East of Our Memories is coming up at 2 o'clock. And there's some great stuff in the children's area. What are the kids up to?
Well, over in the children's area, they'll be having a Building Back Better session where 4-year-olds with broken Lego sets will do a better job than Boris Johnson at rebuilding the economy. That's not actually going to happen, but it would be a good idea. At 1:30, there'll be Make Your Own Banner. And then at 2 o'clock, there'll be music making aimed at 7 to 15-year-olds. But if you can enjoy that at any age, I'm sure.
So we're going to actually break the Facebook feed at the moment. So the time to go and have a have some refreshments. There's free refreshments. You just have to boil your own kettle and open your own
Could you
fridge.
get us one as well? That would
Yes,
be great.
get them in.
Tea, no sugar for me.
We'll be back at 1 o'clock with Sue Ferns, who'll be introducing the next session. So refresh your Facebook, just click on the top of the page or go out and come back in again to make sure you catch the live feed or watch us on YouTube. See you later.
Bye.